All right, so good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to be up here. Thank you so much for having me. As Dan said, my name is Conor Jensen. I lead the field CDO team at Dataiku. To give a little bit of details about what that is and what we do, I want to start with a little bit deeper in my background. So I've been working in and around analytics for the last 20-something years. I was a meteorologist in the Air Force 20-something years ago. Don't ask me about the weather here, but if you want to know what the weather in Afghanistan is going to be like, I'm pretty good at that. Went back to school, studied mathematics, ended up in retail and insurance, helping to build data science platforms and programs over the last now 10, 15 years. And one of the questions that has driven me from the beginning there has been, what's the drivers of success, especially in the corporate space? We're trying to do this in different businesses. We're trying to make changes to how companies operate. And one of the big failure points, or what are the big failure points that sort of prevent a company or an initiative from being successful? So this is one of the things that has been sort of plaguing me now for the last 15 years or so, as I've done this in different companies, and as I've moved over into the tech space, where my role and my team are here to help our customers hopefully be successful with their AI endeavors. There we go. And so what I want to talk about here a little bit today is some of the characteristics that we've seen. We went and we did a study with, we did a qualitative study with some of our customers to really try to understand what made the difference between a company being able to be successful in leveraging AI and data science technology, and what were the markers of ultimately what were going to be failure to be successful. So a lot of this reminds me around the idea of evolution. And why I want to frame this around the idea of evolution is that leveraging these technologies and changing what you're doing is a slow game. Very few companies, and by very few I mean nobody that I've ever worked with, was able to sort of go from 0 to 100 in the span of a year, 2 years, even 3 years. We're talking about, especially even a small or mid-sized company, let alone enterprises who have tens or hundreds of thousands of people in some cases. It takes a lot to move those battleships. And so we have to take the long view when we're working towards these projects. So let's talk a little bit about sort of survival of the fittest, right? I'll remind everybody a little bit of what evolution is. Talk about what are some of the successful adaptations that leads companies to be successful in undertaking this journey, and what are some of the evolutionary dead ends that means that you're going to be back at square one in 2 or 3 or 5 years. You know who I am. If you don't know who Dataiku is, we are a data science platform. We're about 10 years old, founded in Paris. We have 600 and something customers around the globe. It allows all of your people of various skill levels to work with your data wherever it is and apply different types of analytics from sort of your straight sort and order and rank and stack all the way through to generative AI, all in one platform. And why this idea of whether or not a customer is going to be successful or a company is going to be successful with their AI endeavor is really because we can't be successful with a customer unless they're successful in operationalizing and using this technology and these capabilities. So survival of the fittest. To give a little bit of an example, just to sort of like bring us out of the AI and just think about technological change in general, I want to compare and contrast two companies real briefly, Nintendo and Atari. So I'm assuming everybody in the room knows of them, but they're both very well-known video game companies. Atari, as a starting point, was founded in 1972 to develop video games and video game platforms. It has gone bankrupt 4 or 5 different times. It's been in receivership multiple times. And right now, the company currently known as Atari, I think, is doing something with blockchain. I'm not really sure. Which is generally what I think about blockchain in general. But anyways, all right. So Nintendo, on the other hand, was founded in 1889 to make playing cards. It has gone through now over 140 years or 130 years of changes, always with the idea of providing venues for entertainment, right? They've tried different things. They've made playing cards. When that wasn't going well, they partnered with Disney in the 50s to do licensed character playing cards. When adults in Japan stopped playing with playing cards, they started making kids' toys. They released the first electronic toy ever created in Japan. They moved into video games in the 80s after Atari went bankrupt the first time. And even in the last now 40 years since moving into video games, are the only company that has been able to sort of go through that. And so none of these are quick changes, right? Over 130 years of change and evolution in this space, they have been able to leverage technology to continue to be successful at their core mission, which is providing entertainment to families and children. So I want us to think about how we leverage AI. AI is a tool, it is a technology, it is something that allows us to do what we already do better as an organization. You don't suddenly go, hey, we've been doing, consumer packaged goods for 50 years, but now suddenly we're a tech company because we're using AI. No, you're still a CPG company. You just are hopefully using this technology better. So the slowly affected process in evolution results in populations that adapt to their environments, back to our examples before. And these variations accumulate over time to form new species or new products or new offerings or new capabilities, but it takes time for that to happen. The successful adaptations are the ones where you are more suited to your environment, where you're more likely to survive and to continue propagating changes going forward. And evolutionary dead ends are where individuals are less suited to the environment and less likely to reproduce or be successful. So I'm going to go through 3 successful adaptations that we see companies make, and then 3 evolutionary dead ends. The thing I want to say very carefully about these evolutionary dead ends is it was really hard for us to sort of tease out what are these capabilities, if you do it, makes you successful, and which of these capabilities are sort of things you have to get right, but doesn't necessarily make you successful. And that's one of the things I want you to keep in mind with these dead ends, is there are things that getting this right won't necessarily make you successful, but getting it wrong will kill you. So the first of the successful adaptations is creating the right use case roadmap. And more important than deciding which projects or which use cases to work on is how you develop the process by which you identify those on an ongoing basis. The sort of data science development lifecycle, right, or the AI version of the SDLC, agile or waterfall, or things that we've known for now decades, we're still figuring out what that looks like, right? But a really key piece here is that sort of ideation, how you work with the business to decide what projects to work on, that it's driven and linked to your strategy. You aren't coming to the table with a cool toy and trying to figure out how to use it. You're looking at your strategy as a business and what you're trying to achieve, and then identifying which pieces of AI and data science technology you can use to solve that. And you have to have sort of what I call mixed time horizons of things that are near-term, short-term projects that will give you sort of those low-hanging fruit or those quick wins to get you momentum. But you also have to be pushing for things that are longer-term, longer tail, the things that are sort of more visionary and more exciting and more challenging. The last piece I'll say that's not on here that came up in a conversation recently is also, I firmly believe that if every project you're working on in data science is successful, then you're not trying hard enough and you're aiming too low. Data science is largely still founded on statistics, where the null value is a valid answer. And so it's okay to work on a project that didn't work, as long as you take it, you learn from it, and you move on to the next one. One of the dead ends is an overly complex tech stack. So this is the current, first Mark, one of our VCs that works with us, puts together every year sort of their view of the AI landscape. And this is the current one. I think he said there's 1,350 companies on here in 60 different categories. And if you can read it, it's mattturk.com/data2023 if you want to go and actually work with an interactive version of this PDF. And the problem with a lot of technology is that sometimes you look at this and you go, yes, I'll take one of each, please, right? I don't know if you've ever been, for those, who's in IT? Okay. So when you guys are meeting with the business and every 5 minutes they come back and they ask for another tool or another piece of technology, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Okay. You can't maintain all of this, right? It is impossible to stitch all these things together. You end up, I talked about that process of how do you develop these tools. You have to actually look at the process first and identify the tools that fit into your idealized process. But what happens in most cases is we've got these architectures and stacks that have built up over time where we end up having to build a process around the tools, and there's nothing you can do to really improve those processes, let alone, or processes, depending on where you're from, or let alone be able to actually deal with the cost and the overhead of managing all of these things. I'm a huge fan of Colin Chapman, who founded Lotus Cars. The Lotus 7 was a very famous sort of winning race car, and this was his mantra, was simplify, then add lightness. That's how I think about building a stack, right? What is the least number of technologies I can use that serves the most people at my company? And there is no right answer. I can always give my opinion very regularly to customers and to prospects around what are the technologies that I think are the right ones to use today. Depends a lot on where they're at, what their current technology landscapes, what types of initiatives they're trying to solve. There is no one right answer, but you have to ruthlessly prune your tech stack regularly and keep it as simple as possible. The other thing on this sort of complex tech stack piece too is the question of build versus buy. Do I buy this software or do I build this myself? And that's where the core competencies to me comes in, is if this capability is a core competency of your company, then maybe build, assuming you have actual engineering experience within your company. Things like building a Kubernetes orchestration engine, things like building a foundation model. Are you an AI company? Are you a data science platform company? If not, is there an option to go buy one? If so, then go buy it, right? That should always be your mantra. If I can buy this, I should buy this, unless I'm an actual data science platform company, then I should go build a data science platform or a finance interaction platform or whatever that happens to look like. There are good reasons to build technology for yourself, but you should limit that to those core capabilities of your company. On the successful adaptation side, when I asked ChatGPT, because I had to ask, actually I didn't, when one of my friends who I asked this question of what makes things successful, he sent me his, I think, quote, obligatory ChatGPT response. ChatGPT told me I should build an AI-friendly culture, which seems sort of self-serving to me, but I don't know. I thought it was an entertaining one, but I actually do agree that it's important. And the challenge here is you have to do this both as a top-down and as a bottom-up. There is no either or. You have to have executives that are bought in, that understand that this is an evolutionary process that will take time. You don't get to invest in a data science platform and come back 3 months later and say, what have you done for me yet? I don't know what that time horizon is, because eventually you have to have an answer to that question of what have you done for me, right? Boards and finance and CFOs don't like we're still working on that question. So you have to have an answer to that, but you have to also realize that it does take time. And those executives, those boards, those C-suites, they have to know that this does take time, and they have to be bought in and committed to that journey. However, you also have to start with those frontline workers, the people who be working with the data products that you create. So not just hire a bunch of data scientists, parachute them in, and now suddenly you're going to be data-driven. That means changing the culture throughout the company so that people embrace the output of the data products that you're creating. People have to change how they're decision-making. When you go hire new salespeople, do you ask them about how they use data to make decisions? That's being an AI-friendly or a data-driven culture. Asking your marketing team, asking your call center folks, training them how to work with the output of a model, that is building an AI-friendly culture, not making a bunch more dashboards. Ineffective organizational structures. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about with customers, because people always ask me, what's the right org structure? And there is no right org structure, but there are absolutely wrong org structures. There is very much a component of the time and where you're at in your maturity journey, right? Most companies start in sort of a federated or an isolated initiative sort of place where you've got a group that grows up to be more data-driven just by nature of what they do. In e-commerce, that was often in the digital marketing space. In finance, you see that in some of the quant analytics teams. In insurance, you have actuaries, or in the manufacturing space, you'll have supply chain folks. And so you have areas that sort of naturally grow up, but then you have to evolve beyond having all these individual pieces working separated. Oftentimes, that next step is a center of excellence, a COE, as people try to work towards that. That helps to bring scale to your efforts, but it also can create bottlenecks, right? A lot of popular topic over the last few years, hub and spoke. So now we're sort of blending those two. We've got people in the business and in different functions working themselves, or we have a central team that can support them and can be the heavy hitters, but are also making central decisions about platforms and are making centralized governance around data, things like that. The last step in this is often considered to sort of be the embedded step, of where now we really no longer have that central unit that is practitioners, people building models and building data products. You have central decision making around platforms and data, but then all the people who are doing this are out in the business. And again, I want to be clear here. There is no right answer for this sort of globally. There is a right answer for your company at the right point in time. And what will kill your initiatives is when you fail to evolve that as you grow as a company and as you grow as a team. A COE is a great place to start, to build that capability and get things going, but it becomes a bottleneck. The hub and spoke and having people sort of out in the business can be really great, but you can still be constrained by that bottleneck or be too removed from where that's going on. So you have to be continually looking at that. There is no one right answer, but if you get this wrong or you sort of like ossify in a certain place and you don't move forward, that will kill your growth. Next is around investing in talent at all levels of the organization. This goes back a little bit around that AI-friendly culture, but it's distinct from that, is that this is a shift for companies. Working with, and not just generative AI, which is obviously sort of like the new and hot topic in this, but investing in your employees to help them learn to work with data, help them understand what data quality means, help them understand what good data governance looks like, how to interpret the output of a lead scoring model or some sort of new demand forecast tool that you have along those lines. And it's a worrying trend. These two graphs that I have up here are sort of two different time horizons. Whereas you look from 96 to 2008, the decline in spending in internal L&D, and this isn't data specific, but just L&D, learning and development spending within companies, declined drastically over that 20 years. We were less willing to invest in our employees. From 2020 to 2022, we're seeing a little bit of a shift in that other direction. But this is something you have to keep in mind. This is not about having a bunch of smart folks in the corner building tools. You have to be training your frontline workers how to interpret those. You need to train your managers how to ask questions based on the data, how to support those frontline workers, how to use it. You need to be asking your executives. You need to be all the way up to the C-suite. Not everybody needs to know the same thing, right? Not everybody should become a citizen data scientist, if there is such a thing. But everybody does need to be able to work with the data. So a finance analyst today learning to work with models doesn't need to want to become a data scientist. They need to want to work with those models to become a better financial analyst in the future than they are today. I think about this very much. I talked about being a weather forecaster when I was in the Air Force. That was that evolution of meteorology. It went from being a very hand-done, very sort of manual process to weather models, arguably one of the sort of like original AI products over the last 60, 70 years, have evolved and grown into where a huge part of being a meteorologist today is the ability to take the output of a model, interpret it, and apply it to the data that you have on hand and make those decisions. So that has changed what it means to be a forecaster over the last 40 years. And that's what all these other jobs, financial analysts, marketing analysts, supply chain, logistics, et cetera, that's how those jobs will evolve. You don't have to become a data scientist, but we do have to make sure that they understand how to work with the data and the models that we're creating. And the last dead end I'll talk about today is siloed people and siloed data. I stopped and I thought about this a little bit because, there's sort of two primary definitions or ways that we can think about silos. I think a lot of times in business we think about silos as like missile silos, where I'm just taking people and knowledge and something and I'm burying it in the ground where nobody can see it and it's only mine. But the other way we can think about silos is as sort of green silos, right? What you see when you drive around the countryside in Illinois out where I live. And that's a storage place for something on its way somewhere else, right? So we sort of have to have these. Not everybody in a company that has 10,000 people can be connected to every one of those other 10,000 people. So silos are going to naturally evolve where people don't talk to everybody else in every other function, and data doesn't get connected back to your data lake or your lakehouse or your data warehouse or whatever the current or whatever the next version of those are. But we have to think about building grain elevators or data elevators that connect our people and connect the data in the way that it can be used, right? Data is naturally going to evolve in one system, and that will create a silo if we let it and stay by itself. And we have to proactively, every time we're thinking about a new system that we're bringing in, a new data source that we're bringing in, how am I going to connect the data from this to other systems, to other teams, so people can use that? There's been a lot of work around this in terms of building feature stores or other sort of technology solutions to that, but is as much or more a process question and a people question of making sure that we're linking everybody together to have those conversations, to have those questions. It does take time and it does take effort, but we have to do it or those silos will just continue to grow and proliferate. So to wrap this all up and remind you, and to give you a slide you can take one last picture of, or 2 slides you can take pictures of, 3 characteristics of those who have survived and those who are continuing to reproduce: creating the right use case roadmap, investing in talent at all levels of their organization, and building an AI-friendly culture. Thank you, ChatGPT. And 3 pitfalls that have, and for you, may or will lead to extinction: an overly complex tech stack, simplify and add lightness; 2, siloed people, siloed data. My numbers are out of order, sorry. And 3, ineffective organizational structures. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope this is helpful.